What's going on, guys? Welcome to the video. Before I start, I have sorted out my BitChute channel now, so all of my videos will upload there automatically. The link for BitChute, Patreon and my other social media accounts is down below in the description. Now we are going to take a look at a clip from BBC Radio 4's Today programme. On the show they had Brexiteer and Wetherspoon's boss Tim Martin. Now we are going to take a look at a clip from BBC Radio 4's Today programme. On the show they had Brexiteer and Wetherspoon's boss Tim Martin discussing what the mainstream media call a catastrophic no-deal Brexit. He was joined by former BMW boss Ian Robertson, who tried to reinforce the Remoaners' claims a no-deal Brexit will wreck the car industry here in the UK, which Tim Martin quickly shuts him down on and forces him to admit a no-deal Brexit will give a boost to business. Let's check it out.
These are nervous times for people who run businesses. Yesterday, official statistics showed the economy contracting for the first time in 7 years. And even if that data proves to be a blip, global growth is slowing, a trade war is brewing, and there is uncertainty about, well, you know what. The government is now beginning to talk about plans for a bailout fund to support companies that risk going bust due to the short-term impact of a no-deal Brexit. Let's hear from the business front line now. Ian Robertson spent a decade on BMW's main board. He is now a director at Dyson. Tim Martin is the founder and chairman of JD Wetherspoon Spoons, the pub chain, who's campaigned vigorously for Brexit and funded the Vote Leave campaign. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
Morning, Nick.
Tim Martin, recently when you had some slightly tricky results at Wetherspoons, you attacked the establishment, your word, for producing a barrage of negative economic forecasts. Do you still think that, or do you think there are signs that, not just here but elsewhere, the economy is becoming pretty tricky?
Well, Wetherspoons has produced virtually record results. Our profits are well up in the last 2 or 3 years, so I'm not sure about dodgy numbers you refer to.
No, just that in January you were talking about the profits falling 19% in 6 months.
Yeah, well, it's a very short-term period. Our profits this year will be very good, so just to clarify that. But there's been a massive barrage of negativity from the establishment, if you like, from the Bank of England, from a lot of MPs, from a lot of economists, the Financial Times, saying it's a continuation of the referendum campaign, really, that we'll all go to hell in a handcart if we leave the euro. It's sort of transmogrified now. If we leave without a deal, we're in real trouble. I don't believe that for a minute. I think we'd be much better off without a deal, and it's more of the same.
Do you go further than that, Tim? Do you think there is a danger that we talk ourselves into a recession?
To an extent, if we ever would have talked ourselves into a recession, it would have been in the immediate aftermath of a Leave vote, when the Chancellor of the Exchequer, the IMF, etc., said there would be an immediate recession upon voting Leave. That didn't happen. So I'm slightly sceptical about the public reading the FT and someone saying there's going to be a recession, therefore there is one.
Well, let's not talk to the establishment or the FT or anybody else. Let's talk to a man who knows how businesses run in the way that you do. Ian Robertson, as I say, was on the main board at BMW for almost a decade. Ian, I know you've moved on from BMW now, but you know the car industry incredibly well. I suspect they'd have some rather robust things to say to Tim Martin, wouldn't they, when he says that no deal will leave us better off?
Well, I think if you look at the UK car industry, the uncertainty has definitely had an effect over the last few years, and investment has fallen very, very substantially to single to tens of millions of investment only now. That being the case, of course, you also have a bit of a perfect storm out there. So you have world trade issues, as you mentioned earlier. You have the change from combustion engines to electrification, so companies needing to invest a lot. And that, of course, brings a lot of opportunity and chances. But at the moment, the momentum in the UK part of the auto industry has definitely been lost because of the uncertainties and that inability to see how you're going to have an export-led business, which we have in this country, move through the borders in the months and the years ahead.
But what Brexiteers often say about the car industry is you use Brexit, not you now, as I say, you've moved on, but the car industry uses Brexit as an excuse for the fact it got diesel wrong, it's not yet adapted to electrification, it's not yet adapted to the fact that many people don't need to own a car anymore, that they can rent one or hire one by the hour. Is that right, Brexit being used as a cover?
No, I don't think so. And I think, the changes in the auto industry are going to be more significant in the next 10 years than they've probably been in the last century. And the car industry is just about a century old. So all of the things you just mentioned, electrification, autonomous driving, the change to the Uber-type usage, are all things which are great opportunities. These things can bring new technology, they can bring new companies to the fore, they can bring new jobs into play. And somewhat at the moment, you have this transition phase, which is being coloured by the global scene, but also by the scene around Brexit here in the United Kingdom.
And there's no denying that, is there, Tim Martin? Perhaps there's something rather fatuous here that we tend to say, how will the economy react to a no-deal Brexit? The right thing to say is, how will certain sectors? Now, a pub sector. There's not a lot of international trading going on in your business at Wetherspoons, is there? And therefore, maybe you should listen to the likes of Ian Robertson.
The Aussie ambassador to the UK said, no one ever became poorer by free trade. The EU is a protectionist fortress, and if we leave with no deal...
Well, it actually guarantees free trading between 28 nations and is the largest free trade organisation on the planet.
Within 7% of the world, there's free trade. The other 93%, there's a tariff barrier. So if we leave the EU, the car industry will benefit because the UK has said in the event of no deal, car parts which are currently subject to tariffs from outside the EU will be tariff free. So there's a plus. That's the sort of thing that you can do.
Cheaper car parts, Ian Robertson. Also, we're short of time, Tim, so let's just put that to Ian if we could.
At the end of the day, the UK industry has about 80% of its value being imported already from all around the world, but yes, a lot of it duty-free from the European Union. The car industry is global, and I can tell you from, decades of experience, we seek out the most competitive parts all across the world on a day-by-day basis, because that's what keeps this industry vibrant.
He hasn't answered the question.
Go on, Tim,
car
briefly.
parts tariff-free outside the EU.
Absolutely, that there are car parts being brought into this country that do have tariffs on them, but at the same time, they are being compared to ones that are sourced within a very high volume business in the European Union.
Ian Robertson, Tim Martin, thank you very much indeed.
Well, the BBC host starts off that clip making unfounded claims about Wetherspoons' profits. Sound familiar to anyone? It's not just confidence in the country the BBC are trying to destroy, but also Brexiteers' businesses. Making wild claims like that can affect companies like Wetherspoons' stock prices, much like Project Fear has done with trust in the UK economy. Great start by the BBC there. Tim quickly corrects him, but in my opinion he shouldn't need to correct false statements about the profits of his business. The BBC host asked Tim about his factually correct claims that shitweasels at the BBC and in Parliament have been spreading Project Fear nonsense that is hurting the UK economy, which Tim then elaborates on but forgets to put the BBC and Guardian front and centre of these Project Fear doomsday stories we have all heard far too much of at this point. And we still have at least 2 more months of it to come yet. As he said, it's a continuation of the bullshit we see in the run-up to the EU referendum. The only difference is, they are much more desperate now, as we see with the 45,000 dairy cow culling story that was not based in reality, since we have 1.86 million dairy cows in the UK and we export next to nothing when it comes to dairy. The BBC host asked if we are talking ourselves into a recession, which is possible, but the recession talk we have heard over the last few days was shut down today by an economist on Sky News, stating a country cannot go into recession with the record levels of employment we have in the UK right now, and that this 0.2% drop in growth everyone is screaming about is complete nonsense that might well be revised up. Tim points out we will likely be better off without a deal, and a recession is unlikely before the host brings in the former BMW board member Iain, who is a blatant remoaner. He blames Brexit for the auto industry's shit state of affairs at the moment, which we all know is complete bollocks. The best Project Fear campaign the BBC had relating to the car industry was that we would have to pay an extra £1,000 for a new car in the event of no-deal Brexit, and I'm guessing that would likely be because of some tariffs set by the UK, which can easily be waived. But even if it's not something we control, it's £1,000 when you buy a new car, which is not every month or even every year. And cars are tens of thousands of pounds last time I checked, so an extra grand is hardly going to break the bank, is it? The host asked him if Brexit is being used as a cover for the car industry's woes at the moment. And I would say, if Brexit is not being used to completely cover the real reasons behind the car industry's slumps, Brexit is being used as an excuse for some of it at least. Brexit will be good for business, as we all know, and the consumer if we can trade freely with every nation in the world, and not having to stick to the EU's tariffs and rules, which will bring lower prices to the shops. So yes, it is being used as another fake scare story that makes no sense, since even the worst case scenario is not really that bad. Who's going to complain about £1,000 extra for a new car? You just buy a cheaper car. Of course, Ian tries to blame it on Brexit and the global automotive industry's struggles, before the host brings in Tim to refute his bullshit, which Tim does perfectly, pointing out what the ambassador of Australia said about the EU's protectionist fortress, which the host tries to claim the EU is free trade and the biggest in the world. But Tim rightly shits on his nonsense because the EU is only 7% of the world and has free trade with itself, and the select few who will give it what it wants. The other 93% has a trade barrier, so if we leave, we can trade with 93% of the world on terms we make or WTO terms, with the tariffs being waived by the government, who has already committed to 87% of these tariffs being free. And how the car industry will benefit from all those tariff-free car parts from around the world that was locked behind tariff walls while we was in the EU. The host does not allow him to add his next point, which was probably that it will make a lot of other goods cheaper, that we can now import from a bigger market, called the rest of the world. Ian tries to use the fact we buy parts from Europe that will be subject to tariffs in a no-deal Brexit, which Tim does not get a chance to respond to before the host ends the segment. Typical BBC then. Well, my response to Ian's stupid claim that we buy a lot of parts from inside the EU, which will then be locked behind EU tariffs, is really simple. We buy them from elsewhere. You know, the wonderful thing about the world is there is always more than one company able to produce the stuff you want, usually in different countries. And when that reality hits home to big businesses in the EU, they will soon lobby their governments to waive tariffs that keep the money coming in. The EU does not hold the trump cards when it comes to a no-deal Brexit. Reports from over a year ago state the UK will prosper outside of the EU, while they will have to pay £550 billion in tariffs to us for the shit that they buy. If they want to continue being that pathetic, they will end up losing out. Tim might have been trying to point that out before the BBC host cut him off to let the remoaner speak, even though Tim had not finished his point. He did well to call out the Project Fear campaigns that affect the economy, and how talking about recession does not mean we are in one, before calling out the remoaner for trying to avoid his question. That would rubbish the mainstream media's narrative he has been brought on to discuss. I noticed they got a former head of BMW and not a current boss in the auto industry, probably because they told the BBC that Brexit will be good for them, so they can't push their narrative. Instead, we have a dickhead from Dyson, the Hoover manufacturer that produces its goods in Singapore and Malaysia, so his own company would benefit from Brexit, the complete fucking idiot. That sounds like remoaning for the sake of remoaning to me, or has he some other interest in the EU we don't know about? Well, I'm going to end the video there anyway. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. Remember to leave a like, subscribe and share this video as it helps the channel a lot, and I will see you all in the next one.